Hi, I'm Colleen Bell, Executive Director of the California Film Commission and former U.S. Ambassador to Hungary. I'm delighted to be here today with this extraordinary panel for women on the front lines. As the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, women belong in all places where decisions are being made. Women represent half of humanity, and we have the fundamental right to participate in the decisions that shape our lives. It's not a partisan issue, it's a human issue, and a rising tide of women's rights lifts entire nations. Countries are more peaceful and prosperous when women receive equal rights and opportunities, because after all, the condition of the women and the conditions of nations go hand in hand. Men and women are alike, have come from different backgrounds, certainly different countries, but united in the belief that women must be viewed and helped to make and become agents of change, makers of peace, and drivers of progress. Global progress depends on the progress of women. We know that. That's why we're here today. We have seen positive results of that theme being implemented ever since and before the UN Women's Conference in Beijing in 1995. There is so much work to be done. There's a lot of work that has already taken place. So I'm so pleased to introduce these women on the front line who are on our panel today, starting with Sister Norma Pimentel, Executive Director, Catholic Charities of the Rio Grande Valley. Sister Pimentel has been on the front lines of mercy for 3 decades, supporting migrants who are seeking refuge in the US along Texas' border with Mexico. As Executive Director of Catholic Charities of the Rio Grande Valley, she directs efforts to provide shelter, food, sanctuary, and comfort to people often treated as less than human. Her organization has housed and assisted well over 100,000 people at the border. And Yasmeen Hassan, Global Executive Director of Equality Now. Yasmeen became the Global Executive Director of Equality Now in 2011 after serving as Deputy Executive Director and Program Director for 3 years. Previously, she was with the United Nations Division for the Advancement of Women, where she worked on the implementation of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and the Secretary General's Study on Violence Against Women. We also have Kay Buck, Chief Executive Officer, Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, also known as CAST. Kay has had over 20 years experience in the human rights field, joining the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking as Executive Director since 2003. Ms. Buck leads the first organization of the US exclusively designed to work on the issue of human trafficking. Under Ms. Buck's leadership, CAST is known to be one of a kind leadership development program, survivors of trafficking who are now using their voices to impact federal and state policy. Pamela Yates is the co-founder and creative director of Skylight, a nonprofit company dedicated to creating feature-length feature films and digital media tools that advance awareness of human rights and the quest for justice by implementing multi-year outreach campaigns designed to engage, educate, and activate social change. And we have Bonnie Abaunza, founder Abaunza Group, executive producer Francesco. Bonnie has dedicated her life to humanitarian work through human rights and social justice advocacy. Through her group, she works closely with filmmakers, artists, production companies, distributors, and non-governmental organizations to develop and execute social impact campaigns for films and documentaries. Bonnie's work has addressed a myriad of human rights and civil rights issues as she has brought hard-hitting campaigns and major celebrity engagement to issues as diverse as child slavery, campus sexual assault, human trafficking, genocide, environmental justice, girls' education, food safety, and many others. Stephanie Filo Jones is an Emmy and Peabody award-winning TV film editor activist with over a decade of experience editing and producing both scripted and unscripted content. She is based in Los Angeles, California, and Sierra Leone, West Africa, and also serves on the board for Girls Empowerment Sierra Leone, a social impact and feminist-based organization for Sierra Leonean girls aged 11 to 16. She is one of the co-founders of End Ebola Now, an organization created in 2014 to spread accurate information and awareness about the Ebola virus and its impact on the artistic community. Monica Ramirez is the daughter and granddaughter of migrant farm workers. She's also an attorney, author, and activist. She founded Justice for Migrant Women, a national organization that seeks to advance the human and civil rights of migrant women workers. Monica is also co-founder of Alianza Nacional de Campesinas, the Latin House, Sisters Rising, and She Se Puede, among other initiatives. She serves on the board of the National Women's Law Center and is a member of the Time's Up Global Leadership Board. Monica wrote the Dear Sisters letter from 700,000 farm worker women to women in Hollywood that was published in Time magazine in November 2017 that has been credited with helping to spark the Time's Up movement. She has received numerous awards for her leadership, as have many our other panelists as well. So thank you all very much for being here, and we can go ahead and get started. So why don't I turn this over with a question? Let's turn this question to Yasmeen. So what does it mean to you to be on the front lines? This means different things to different people, but what does it mean to you, Yasmeen?
Well, to me, it really meant, from the time I was 10 years old, it meant following your heart. And if you see injustice in the world, you take some steps and you try to figure out what those steps must be, right? So when I was 10 years old, we had a military dictator. I grew up in Pakistan. We had a military dictator who basically took away all women's rights. So our laws became very unequal. Women couldn't give testimony in court. Women, if they were raped, stood at risk of being flogged or stoned. So these laws really, and I was a 10-year-old child watching this, and I said that, oh my God, if your government does not believe that you're an equal and full citizen, what can you do? You can have any amount of education, you can have any amount of, but you are a secondary citizen. So I decided to dedicate my life into looking at women's movements and how women have countered, particularly at that time, it was discrimination within religion, right? So I do see that a lot of world religions have been used to put down women, and that's not the point of religion, right? So long story short, I studied women's movements and human rights law and Islamic law when I came to study in the United States. And now I'm the Global Executive Director of Equality Now. And our mission is really to bring full equality for women and girls in this world. And the way we do it is through the laws. So we hold governments to account to make sure that laws treat men and women equally and that they're all laws against all forms of violence against women.
Thank you. And Monica, what does it mean to you to be on the front lines?
For me, being on the front lines, like Yasmeen, it means being closest to the ground. I think that there are a lot of decisions that are made about people's lives and for people that aren't grounded in the reality that people actually live. And when we are the closest to the ground in community, listening directly to people about what they need and want, that is when we are best positioned to make the greatest change. So in my work, particularly coming from the migrant farm worker community, being on the front lines means being in my community so that I can best listen and learn and do what I can to help elevate the voices of the people in my community for the changes that they want to see in the world.
Thank you. And Pamela, tell us what it means to you to be on the front lines.
I think that every one of us, especially women, can be and are on the front lines. You just have to figure out what your front line is. And for me, I went to Guatemala in 1982 to investigate the role that the United States was playing there in terms of foreign policy and propping up brutal military dictatorships. But something I learned there that I've carried with me throughout my filmmaking life is a Mayan concept, the concept of granito de arena, tiny grain of sand, that each of us have a tiny grain of sand to contribute to positive social change. And all of these grains of sand together create a groundswell that can make a difference. So I just want to throw it out to you all. I am so honored to be here with all these colleagues, all these women who are putting their granito de arena, their tiny grain of sand, into making change.
Thank you. And this will be a lightning round to all of you of what it means to be on the front lines, and then we'll move it. But I think it's important you each have a moment to share what that means to you. Kay, what does it mean to you to be on the front lines?
CAST is an organization that actually helps facilitate people leaving a human trafficking situation. So we are definitely in the trenches working directly with survivors to get them the help that they need in that emergency situation. And I think what it means for not just me, but my whole team at CAST, who are working 24/7 to help survivors. And we also employ survivors. And for me, it really means listening to survivors as the key constituent that we answer to and that we're accountable to. And yeah, for me, it's learning from survivors on the front lines so that we are, doing the best service to them that makes the most sense to them. That's what being on the front lines is to me.
And Stephanie, you're next. What does it mean to you to be on the front line?
I think for me, a lot of times being on the front lines comes down to storytelling and being able to get people's stories that maybe wouldn't have been heard or underrepresented voices heard in an authentic way and in a way that kind of shines maybe a light on a topic that someone may not have known about or may not have even crossed their minds. But I think, it's so important for us, especially, this panel with so many amazing women. It's a matter of just, making sure that women's voices are heard, making sure that, different types of women are heard. So I think, for me, it comes down to that storytelling aspect a lot of the time.
It does. We all have to be even better storytellers. I think that, and find a new language that we can use to really connect people moving forward. And Bonnie, what does it mean to you?
Well, first of all, it is an honor and privilege to be on this panel with these amazing women. I know all of them. I work with all of them. And so it's a tremendous pleasure. Like Yasmeen, I've been an activist since I was very young. And I've been an activist, a human rights, civil rights activist for over 40 years. I'm the daughter of immigrants who came from Central and South America, from countries that had authoritarian governments. So from a very young age, I understood the challenges that they faced, and they were very scared when, at a very young age, I decided to become a human rights activist. But to me, being on the front lines means being right in the middle of the fight. And that has been a lifetime of being in these protests where I've been arrested. I've had to deal with violence. I go to war zones, refugee camps. I do what I can to both address the humanitarian needs and the human rights needs. And I'm driven by a principle, which is a quote from the Talmud. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now, love mercy now, walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. So I can't abandon the work. And on the social justice front, I was part of the anti-apartheid movement. I was part of the sanctuary movement. In the 80s, I was part of the Tibetan exile movement. And I'm proud of the decades of work that I've done with women like the ones that are on this panel to try and make the world a better place, and in particular, a better place for women and children. So if I have to be on the ground, I have to face that violence, face the arrests, I will do that.
And now I'll turn it over to Sister Norma, but I'm going to expand the question for you, Sister Norma. I'm going to ask you what it's like to be on the front lines. And I'd also like to know, what is it like to be on the front lines during a pandemic, and how has this affected your ability to conduct your essential work?
Being in the front lines is being able to have the privilege to accompany the many families, thousands of families who find themselves on the ground suffering and struggling because of the fact that they're immigrants and they're looking for safety, for protection, and being able to be by their side and then be a voice for them so that others can hear and see and feel what I feel, so that they can make changes to policies and to a society, a structure that is destroying humanity, especially the most vulnerable. And so the pandemic has definitely made it tougher for us, but not impossible. It keeps us going and keeps us finding ways to reach them and to protect them and to help them make sure they're safe.
Thank you. Yes, challenging times. All the more reason why we need people like you out there on the front lines. So supporting and helping the most vulnerable among us. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to ask some more directed questions to each of you. And why don't we go ahead, and I'll start with Pamela. So Pamela, your 3 documentaries on the Guatemalan genocide, frame the historical context, and also focus on how the victims are demanding justice and accountability. What roles have Guatemalan women, and in particular Mayan indigenous women, played in this fight for justice?
Well, they're at the forefront of it. And, you know, one of the things that struck me listening to all the other women on this panel is that a really central tenet to being on the front lines is making a long-term commitment, making a lifelong commitment to social change, because that's really the only way that change happens. Long-term and desde abajo, from the bottom up. Most of the protagonists in the films I've made over 35 years have been women. Why? Because they're so interesting, and because they're so proactive, and because they come up with creative solutions for solving very, very difficult policy problems, although they're not often recognized as such. And so I think that filmmaking and filmic storytelling, cinematic storytelling, can be such a powerful way of giving these women a platform. For example, in the first film I made in Guatemala in 1982, there was a young Mayan 22-year-old who told her story, and she became the storyteller, the protagonist of the film. Her name was Rigoberta Menchú Tum. And 10 years later, after the film and her autobiography helped put her on the world stage, she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, the first indigenous person to be so awarded, and at that time, the youngest person. So these films can create a virtuous cycle with the protagonists, with the women, where the women bring the film alive and the film give the women a platform, put them on the world stage, so that their message can go out and be discussed and be influential in the world as we know it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I believe that, you know, filmmaking has the ability to bring social cohesion and really help to educate and inform people on some of our most pressing issues. It's a real catalyst for change. And so thank you for the movies that you're making.
Yeah, and it's a real equalizer, isn't it? Because the powerful can have the same amount of screen time as the powerless. And that is a really powerful mixture for ideas and messages.
And could I just add, Colleen, to what Pamela is saying? And I just really want to compliment you and Paco, because the trilogy, you know, those three documentaries did so much to really educate the world about the civil war in Guatemala and the genocide, and in particular, the genocidal rape that occurred. And I hear all the time from people who do finally speak about Guatemala and recognize it as a genocide, and they credit your three documentaries for educating them. So I really want to give you that shout out, because I hear it all the time. And so you've done something tremendous to make people aware of what happened and keep them interested and really pay tribute to the courage of the Guatemalan people, in particular the Mayan community. So thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Yeah, okay, so now I'll turn it over to Yasmeen. And so Yasmeen, you know, what brought you to working on achieving gender equality through the law around the world? You know, tell me about your journey. I'd like to know about your successes and the challenges that you faced.
Well, Colleen, I mean, first of all, I do want to congratulate Pamela and then give her a shout out also, because I think film makes such a big difference. And when you're talking about working in the law is the opposite of film. It's exceedingly boring, right? So, but it's exceedingly important. So we work very closely with filmmakers to bring our stories to life. Now, I'll get into my journey. I talked a little bit about it before, because I did grow up in Pakistan and I did see why the law was so important. And it struck a nerve in me. And I was just like, it is really important. Whatever else, there's a lot of stuff we need to do to get to gender equality, but your government really has to believe that you're equal, and the government laws and policies have to promote women as equal citizens. So that was one thing I've learned first. The second thing was that very often the whole things, you know, religion around the world is one of the most important thing to people. And now more and more people are getting increasingly religious. Yet religion has often been used as a tool to bring people down. And I'm giving the example of my own country. And what has happened now, this is why I studied Islamic law, to figure out, is the religion as it's portrayed as being so adverse to women's rights. It is not true. It is not the religion. It is the people who interpret and use the religion for political means. So this year, actually, we are very, very proud. No, actually, last year, you talked a little bit about the Beijing conference. And the Beijing conference was our Bible. What came out of it was the Beijing Platform for Action. We thought that if this was all done, our work, we can all go out of business and we can get out of the front lines and we can sit back and relax and do whatever we want to. But at the Beijing conference, one of the things they said is that all laws that discriminate against women or treat men and women equally will be revoked in 10 years. And none of that was done because people didn't realize what a discriminatory law was. So Equality Now started working with women lawyers around the world. And I want to also give a nod to Monica, who said, listening to people on the ground is the most important thing. You can't parachute in somewhere and tell people how to live their lives, right? So we work with grassroots women's rights groups around the world to say, what is the issue with your law? What are the changes that you want to make? And we created the first database of all the laws around the world that treat men and women equally. And in the last 25 years, we've seen a lot of changes and a lot of progress, but the area where we didn't see that much progress is in the area of family laws. And family laws is very tied in very often to religion and custom. So those are the hardest to change. So what I was going to say is what I'm very proud of this last year is that we started a global campaign to end discrimination in family law, working with women, working to reform religious interpretation. So we are working with Musawa, which is a group that works of women lawyers working to counter interpretations of Sharia law. We are working with Swedish Council on Churches with amazing Christian women who are saying, why has Christianity been used in this way? Same way with women in all religions and different kind of customary laws that have been used to reclaim women's rights. So it's important work and I'm very thrilled to be doing it. And I feel we are making a difference. But again, the work is not that easy and not that exciting to explain to people. And that's why we work very, very closely with filmmakers, whether it's documentary filmmakers or others, to bring the message to light. But it's been an honor and it's been a privilege to do this work, and I would have never done anything else.
Yasmeen, you spoke of families and the vulnerability of some families. So my next question will be for Sister Norma. And Sister, you've spent years helping migrants and asylum seekers at the border, and we all know the inhumane conditions in the detention centers and the numerous challenges facing these people, these families, and the dangerous conditions that they're fleeing from in their home countries. There have been reports that the centers remaining open and about family reunification plans. Can you update us a little bit about the current situation?
Yes, of course. I think there's so many changes happening presently that are very good. I think the new administration in the United States is moving forward in a very humane, respectful way towards family and family reunification, which is really good. And so they have a very difficult job ahead in trying to do that. But I think with the cooperation of everybody, I think that it may be a successful plan as we move forward. Families are being reunited. As I'm talking today, actually, all this week, we've had so many families that waited for 2 years almost, in Matamoros, and just because of the fact that when they entered, the previous administration decided that they just needed to wait in Mexico for their process of asylum. This week has marked a very historical moment where all of them have been allowed to enter the United States and continue that process in the United States. It has been such an emotional moment after walking with each group into the United States in tears because of the fact that all the suffering has finally ended. And so now they're walking with dignity and respect into a country that opens the doors to them and says, welcome. And it's amazing that we're living a very beautiful moment in history for humanity, respect to life. And I think that right now I'm very hopeful that what moves ahead is going to be good for the immigrants and the refugees that are struggling so much and that are needing to be heard. Their story needs to be heard, why they came to this country, fleeing from the terrible conditions where they're coming from. So I'm hopeful for this near future that things will be better for everybody here at the border.
Well, thank you for all the great work that you do. And, here we are in the middle of a pandemic, and this pandemic knows no borders. This has been a global condition. And, if this doesn't present a moment in history where we can be united over kind of the fear and the need to combat this global pandemic, I don't know what else will get us to that place. So thank you for your good work. So now I'll turn it over I'd like to ask Monica. Monica, so your work with Justice for Migrant Women addresses numerous issues in relation to the treatment, safety, security of these women, including gender-based violence. Please tell us a little bit about what you're doing to get help for legislators, civic leaders, and communities that are trying to tackle these issues.
Well, I think that many people don't consider the needs of farm worker women and of migrant community members because many of these community members are invisible, and they are not the people that are top of mind for many political leaders because they don't consider them a constituency. And much of the work that we do is to try to elevate the priorities of these community members and to make sure that political leaders understand that they are accountable to them too. And that it isn't sufficient to say that political leaders feel bad for certain people who experience things like gender-based violence or more harm during the pandemic or the fallout from certain policies. It's not enough to say that people feel badly if they're not actually taking action to make things better for them. And so part of our work is educating political leaders about what needs to change, like the fact that farm workers haven't been covered by the most basic rights in our country for more than 80 years, and the fact that it is legal for 12-year-old children to work without restriction in the fields. It is appalling. And when political leaders talk about caring about these workers, those words don't mean much to us, understanding the history of the law and the fact that these workers continue to suffer because political leaders fail to have the courage to make the changes that are needed. So we talk very frankly with political leaders about where they're falling short, and we make clear that we have an expectation that they change things. And along with that expectation comes the solutions. So we try not to only call out the problems, but also to offer the solutions. And when it comes to gender-based violence, specifically related to farm worker women, farm worker women in our country have reported at rates of 90% and 80% in another study that sexual violence in the workplace is one of their major concerns. Many farm worker women have experienced sexual violence at work, and few of them have ever received any justice for that. So we work to raise awareness about this issue, to provide tools to the women so they understand what their rights are and they know where to get help. And we also spend a great deal of our time doing the work to humanize these migrant workers and farm workers specifically, because people need to understand that they are human beings and they deserve safety, security, and the same rights and protections as everyone else. So we use a mix of policy work, storytelling, and organizing, good old organizing, to try to make the changes that are needed.
Yeah, it's a combination of all of those things, isn't it? And back to what Stephanie said earlier, the need for storytelling and to be really good storytellers. So I'll turn it over to Stephanie now. And as a film editor, you've worked on many projects that have tackled the issues of sexual violence, justice for incarcerated women who are in prison for killing their abusers, traffickers, girls' empowerment, and other stories that address challenges for women. Can you talk to us a little bit about both the challenges and also the rewards of telling stories like these?
Sure. I think as an editor, we're kind of the last people that see a story, right? We're the last people to kind of touch on something and, the last people to push it out the door. So the big challenge, I think, in telling stories like these or anything that's surrounding sexual violence is just telling it as respectfully as possible and making sure that the survivors' voices are heard in a way that they should be. It's such a brave thing to even be able to come on screen at all and talk about, the worst experiences of your life. So it's, you might be sitting with footage for, months, hours, days, all this amount of time, and you just need to figure out a way to condense the stories, obviously, but to tell them tell them as they should be. So that's kind of the biggest challenge, I think, that as editors and as filmmakers in general, we kind of face, is just, you know, giving justice to the people who are willing to speak up. And I think the rewards in this profession also are kind of, you know, you can change the narrative about a topic. You know, it's possible going into, say, a story about, you know, someone who killed their abuser who's in prison, you know, or someone who is a victim of trafficking. Someone might look at that and say, hey, like, you know, they killed someone, they deserve to be in prison, but, you know, they might not know the full backstory of something. So you have a real opportunity to kind of, you know, shed light on something that maybe people wouldn't have thought about otherwise. So I think that's kind of, and then also the reward of seeing maybe other survivors being willing to come forward as a result of your work, I think is also, you know, very, very rewarding. And when you think about the statistics, you know, 1 in 6 American women will be the victim of sexual assault at some point in their lives, which is just horrific to think about. So I think, you know, sharing these stories that are clearly, you know, affect all of us, you know, helps to get more people to speak up, and hopefully helps to find justice for the people who haven't for so long.
You help to bring a voice to so many voiceless. So thank you so much for all that good work that you do. And now to Bonnie, you've worked on for decades on many social impact campaigns. You've worked for films like Francesco, and well as art, music, and other media. I mean, how can all of these come together to drive change on some of these global issues that, you know, we're talking about even here for some of our panelists who are on the front lines? Like, what kind of a relationship is it when you have the filmmakers and the impact campaigns, and then you have the people on the front lines doing the work, how we come together, what that looks like?
Well, it's brilliant when we all come together, because that's how we're able to make that change. And again, I you know, give a shout out to you know, everyone on this panel, and you know, those of you that have embraced filmmaking, because your movies are making a difference. You know, I think back to the movie Missing, and how that educated people about Chile and the dictatorship there. Movies like Hotel Rwanda, when people didn't really know what was happening with that genocide, and Blood Diamond, people didn't know, you know, what a blood diamond was and the impact that was having. Movies like El Norte, you know, which should be shown again now, you know. So the power of media, the power of documentaries, films, art, music, they reach people in a very different way. Yasmeen said the law is boring. Yes, she's right. I was planning to be a lawyer at one point, and it was just, no, I'm just going to stick to my activism. But it is the power of media that people that connect to these stories. We're able to raise awareness, we're able to talk about advocacy, and we're able to say, these are the actions that you can take. But it's key to educate people about these stories. And that is the power of filmmaking. And all of those movies that I just mentioned, you know, and including, you know, An Inconvenient Truth, you know, Pamela's films on Guatemala, do more to mobilize people, because once they know these stories, right? And so many people didn't know about the Cambodian genocide, and then they saw the killing fields and they were outraged, and they said, well, I have to do something. So it is the power of these filmmakers wanting to tell these stories and getting the voices of these people out there that then inspires the public to say, no, I have to do something. I can't just sit back and allow this to keep happening. So there is an investment in the issue, and the right kind of impact campaign will give people the opportunities on how they can be engaged in both advocacy and calls to action. And it's critically important in all impact campaigns with these films to bring on the NGOs like the ones that are here with Equality Now, and CAST and Catholic Charities and Justice for Migrant Women, because when we bring them on as partners, we turn to them. As an impact campaign producer, I turn to them and say, okay, I've got this film. You're doing the work on the ground. You are making the change. How can this film help you? And so we collaborate together to come up with the initiatives, whether they be advocacy initiatives, whether they be fundraising initiatives, and whatever the calls to action, I let the NGOs determine those. And the filmmakers are all on board because they want their movies to be seen as widely planned. They want their movies to make a change. That's why they make social justice themed films. So it is critically important to have the partnership, with the filmmaker, with the distributor, and with the NGOs. And there are long-term campaigns. I mean, Blood Diamond is still making an impact, and Amnesty International and Global Witness, still, seeing the benefits of having partnered on that campaign. So to me, it's critically important, and that's how we reach, the most people with film, with media.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned cast. So now my next question will go to Kay. And so Kay, tell us a little bit more about cast and about the approaches that you are taking to help to end human trafficking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, CAST's mission is to end human trafficking through education, through advocacy, and empowering survivors of human trafficking. And so along what Bonnie just said about collaboration is key. We collaborate and partner directly with the people we serve, with survivors. And as I said earlier, many survivors are on staff at CAST too. And I actually think the law is exciting. I can see I'm the only one here who might think that, but it's exciting when survivors or people who are impacted by those laws are the ones making the laws. That's how it should be done. And that's what Bonnie was saying about collaboration. So whether it be in working with a filmmaker or working with a policymaker, having the grassroots, as Monica said earlier, having the grassroots involvement in that is absolutely essential. And we're seeing more of that now with the emphasis on not just services, but movement. So we're providing direct services to survivors of trafficking who then are healed enough or who are stable enough to be able to engage in public policy dialogue, in filmmaking. And when film directors work with us, which they do, and Bonnie has had the opportunity to work with us often as well on social impact campaigns, survivors are actually the ones who are talking with the film directors, talking with the cast of the movie to make sure that it's as authentic as possible. Because what we know for sure, it's not just about storytelling, or it's not about telling other people's stories for them. It's them feeling empowered enough to tell their own story and to inform policies and to inform films from their own experience as experts.
Yasmeen, I just wanted to say that I think I was a lawyer in a past life. And I think that actually lawyers and filmmakers, storytellers, we have so much in common. We really do. And I often say, I'm a human rights activist and a filmmaker. And people say, well, are you an activist or are you an artist? And I say, well, it's like a lawyer. Lawyers practice their human right by using the law as a tool. And we filmmaking activists use storytelling and filmmaking as our tool to practice human rights.
And if I could just add as an example, the film Roma from Netflix, which won the Oscar. So Monica collaborated on that impact campaign to focus on the rights of domestic workers. And Kay honored the film because victims of human trafficking connected with the character that Yalitza played in the film. And that movie has had tremendous impact. And so there's an example of CAST, seeing, that a collaboration here really benefited their work, as did Monica with her efforts to help domestic workers. So there's just another example of, where these two fantastic organizations were able to use the power of film, to help advance their work.
And can I chime in there? Because especially, we don't see a whole lot of films on labor trafficking. And so, it's more than 50% of our cases at CAST. And we're one of the largest service providers to survivors of trafficking in the country, in the US. And so it was really amazing to see this issue of domestic servitude being touched upon in that particular film. And, since I'm here, I call on all filmmakers and directors to really tackle this issue of forced labor and labor trafficking, particularly of women and girls, because they are directly impacted.
Yeah, and if I can just jump in, I am a lawyer, and I also do have an appreciation for organizing with film. But what I want to highlight in listening to each of you is that filmmakers who choose to center survivors and individuals who have incredible life experiences that are ordinarily not heard, filmmakers like you, Pamela, and Stephanie, you make a choice to use your craft to give light and power to those who need that boost. Not all filmmakers do that. Just like not all lawyers center the organizing and power of people on the ground. And so I just want to say that because you have made choices to do that in a way to honor the power and the struggle of people for purposes of helping them make the changes that they want in their lives. And that is something that is really special and incredible. So thank you.
Another great documentary filmmaker among us is Evgeny Afanevsky, whose film Francesco will be released later this month. And Sister Norma is recognized in that film, so rightfully so, for the extraordinary work that you've done. I've had the wonderful opportunity to see the film and to see you in it. So I'm just wondering, Sister Norma, can you share with us, you're with the Catholic Charities. I am a Catholic. How has the Pope's interest on the border crisis and his recognition of your work, which is highlighted in the film, how has that recognition from Pope Francis kind of impacted the work that you're doing?
Yes, I think that Pope's has focused very clearly on the humanity of the immigrants in this, and the fact that we must not overlook the fact that they're hurting, they're suffering, and we must welcome them. We must embrace them. We must open our hearts to them. And so, but the fact that he does that and the fact that he recognizes the work that we do here at the border really lifts us up for the world to see it, And so his presence is very important in what we do because he's a holy man that recognizes and highlights the fact that humanity is fragile. Humanity is something we must hold dear, close to us. And so it really brings us to the forefront by the fact that he walks with us in this journey to accompany and to be present to the many people who are hurting and that are immigrants, and that we must be there for them. And so I think that day that he chose to recognize the work that I was doing on behalf of everybody else that was joining me was so amazing and so powerful to make us feel that look, this little town out in the middle of nowhere nobody knew about, McAllen, Texas, this tremendous work is being done with people that I believe that's what we all must do. So it was beautiful.
That's wonderful. And we, at this time, humanity really needs this important moral leadership that is driven by inclusion and compassion. And he's just extraordinary. I was so delighted to see you recognized.
I loved your role in that too. It was a memorable role in an epic, really epic documentary. Congratulations.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think that we have, we're going to be running out of time fairly soon. So I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to share what they believe to be a call to action at this moment. So I'll just kind of randomly go around and choose and whatever is that you would like to share. How about we start with Monica?
Sure. My call to action for everyone who's viewing this is that never forget that you can make a change no matter where you are in the world, and you should start wherever you're able to start. You don't have to start with, monumental change. Just start locally in working on things that you care about, including migrant rights and farm worker rights. The important thing is to just get started.
It's true. And believe in the power of one person to make a difference. Okay, let's go. How about Stephanie?
Sure. Just echoing what Monica said, I think it's just a matter of, figuring out what you're passionate about and going from there. I think we each have our own unique, specific skill sets, and things that we can bring to different projects, different organizations. So it's a matter of figuring out what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and just fighting the good fight.
Yasmeen.
Well, I want to second both of them. And I want to make a plug for gender equality. I think all of us work on that in our different ways. And I would say if there are women or men watching this, we want a world where men and women are equal. When we build back from COVID, it has to be a more equal world for women, for minorities, for income groups and all that. So each of you can do your step. There's no step that is too small, and everybody has different skill sets. I often get people saying, well, you've done all this in activism, but I don't have, I'm an accountant. I was like, we love and need accountants. Like every skill is needed in the fight. Figure it out, join a cause, whether you're giving money, whether you're giving yourself your skills. We need all of you to make the world better.
Bonnie.
So I would like to ask everyone who's watching this panel discussion to please support the nonprofit organizations in your community. They do the critical work, just like the women on this panel with Justice for Migrant Women, Equality Now, CAST, Catholic Charities. Please support their work. They are the change makers. They are the ones doing the hard work every single day. And the grassroots organizations, they need money, they need volunteers, please support their work. And also please support the filmmakers who choose to make these films that tackle these social justice issues. They're the hardest ones to make. Everyone wants to see, the Avengers, everyone loves the Avengers. Those are the movies that get made and everybody loves them and they're great. When you have documentary films and feature films that tackle these social justice issues, please support them. They need to be made, they need to be seen, because these are the films that really raise awareness about these issues.
After a year of incredible sadness and death and destruction, let's use this year to build back in a different way. Let's value the people that keep our societies going. Because you know what? We can find a way forward. It doesn't have to be that way. Let's strengthen our democracy. Let's welcome immigrants back into our country. And it's a great opportunity. Let's take it. And I really look forward. My other call to action is when I can actually hug all of you physically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And how about Kay?
Well, I think similar to what Pamela just said, 2020 was a very unkind year to many of us, and especially those of us working in the trenches. And I would say a call for unity, like reach out, for those of you watching, reach out to your grassroots organizations and support them in any way. We do, as Yasmeen said, we do need accountants, we need policymakers. It really will take everyone in our communities to work together to tackle some of these very complicated social justice issues, from human trafficking to farm worker rights, just everything. So I really think if we can unify and find kindness and have a different type of response in 2021 compared to 2020, we're heading in the right direction.
Absolutely. A sustained effort will be needed beyond the pandemic. I've come to realize I'm the mother of 4 children. And I thought at one point, I can hand off the baton. No, it's just, I think as we're all here living and breathing, just going to have to all keep at it. It's necessary and what we all need to do. And now, finally, Sister Norma, share with us a call to action.
The time is now, and don't miss the opportunity to care, to make a difference in your life for those that need you around you. Be present and respond. Don't hold back. Be yourself. Be the good that you can give to all that need you, and that this world can be a better place because of you. We need to join forces and make a difference and make this world a better place for all of us.
Amen.
Exactly. And we're stronger together. Thank you so much, Monica Ramirez, Yasmeen Hassan, Pamela Yates, Sister Norma, Stephanie Filo Jones, Kay Buck, Bonnie Abaunza. It's been such a pleasure to be here to talk with all of you today. Keep up the great work.
We have a group hug. Just put your hands on the side of the frame. Yes.
And thank you, Ambassador Bell.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see everyone.
And now we'll leave you with a clip from Francesco, coming to theaters near you and streaming exclusively on Discovery Plus.
This is a man who's opened his heart to the hearts of all of humanity. This is a man who cries with humanity, who laughs with humanity, who suffers with humanity. This is Pope Francis.
La humanidad vive una crisis. I'm convinced that we can make a difference. I'm sure. Pedimos perdón por los abusos sexuales por parte de miembros cualificados de la Iglesia.
We sat across from each other, and he said, Juan Carlos, the first thing I want to tell you is that I apologize for the pain that the church has caused you. I never thought I'd see that day.
Ser la voz, pero no de una manera programática, me sale solo. Y también por mi sangre migrante.
I was in the cells of the detention facility with children all around me. The Border Patrol that were watching us said, thank you, sister, for helping us see that they're human beings. To be a symbol of a presence of caring for humanity, to defend life, how our role can make a difference.
Yo quiero agradecer en su persona a todas las religiosas de los Estados Unidos. Las felicito. I think God made him experience what people experience.